Hello and welcome back to Podcast with a K. I'm your host Carla with a K, and we are back on this fine Monday evening for me, which is when I record the show, and whatever time of day of the week it is for you, my dear listeners. Welcome back. I'm your host Carla with a K. As I said, you've just listened to DNA, More Than a Game by Andrea, Bocelli, David Guetta, EJAE, and Megan Thee Stallion, which is the official theme song of the 2026 FIFA World Cup, which is what this entire episode will be all about. This has been my current obsession. I only care about sports when it's the World Cup specifically. And I'm very, very excited with how things have been going. It's been an amazing season so far. It's personally relevant because the games are being played in North America, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. And for me personally, I'm very excited. I've learned a lot just by listening to the telecasters. I literally have the commentators. I literally have the games on most of the day on my second monitor on the TV. I am not gonna lie, I actually paid for Fubo just so that I could watch the shows from wherever I was, the games from wherever I was. And it's been great. It's been really fun. Most of the games have been interesting. I mean, it makes sense. They're all the best players and the best teams in the world. But it's funny for someone like me who doesn't necessarily follow sports outside of this specific season. So every 4 years I rise out of the ashes like a soccer fiending cicada. But I was talking to one of my friends about the World Cup during the first game that Mexico played in, and we were texting up a storm. And after that, I was telling, I was telling my parents, and I was telling some other friends about how fun the game had been and about how crazy everything was. And I just kept catching glances, and I'm like, I know, I'm such a sports aficionado. But it's funny because, like I said, I didn't necessarily follow sports like that. And one of my friends was like, wow, look at you suddenly caring about sports. And I'm like, no, I care about sports every 4 years. Specifically, the World Cup is, I think, one of the most fun and interesting times. Additionally, I think there's just been a lot of sports hype recently, following, of course, the Knicks win in the NBA. So I think it was just an exciting time in sports all around. But like I said, personally relevant, North America. And I learned a bunch of stuff just from listening to the commentators, such as, for example, the very first ever World Cup match in 1930 was featuring a game. So there was 2 games happening simultaneously, but one of the games was between, I believe, France and Mexico. And Mexico, of course, is my home country, my beloved. And the thing that made this so specific and wonderful and beautiful is that not only did Mexico once again open the World Cup, they also hosted the 1,000th ever game. It was between Japan and Tunisia, but it took place in Monterrey, Mexico. But that alone, that little fact, I was like, you know what? I'm right to be excited about this. So World Cup, the Knicks game, and also the North Carolina Hurricanes also won the Stanley Cup. So like I said, very exciting time for me personally in sports. I don't necessarily care about sports enough to follow it all the time, but this year has been great because everything that I have a personal connection to has been on the up. Between New York, the Canes, and of course Mexico, I've been having a lot of fun in the general energy and atmosphere that is sports. Specifically, the sports I care about being basketball and soccer. Hockey, I don't know anything. I've actually been to Canes games, though, just from living here. But it's been a great time. It's been very fun. The very first song you heard, like I said, DNA, More Than a Game, Andrea Bocelli, David Guetta, EJAE, Megan Thee Stallion, I thought was the perfect combination of artists. EJAE, of course, is someone who I've been following closely. I think I did an episode previously. If I didn't do an episode of the podcast, I planned on it and then I didn't. But EJAE is one of the singing voices for the cast of K-pop Demon Hunters. And Mexico and South Korea have a bond that they've been nurturing for about a decade at this point. They faced off against each other. Mexico won, but still love South Korea. And South Korea's team posted a very, very nice message about how the game was the game, but the relationship still stands. And I'll explain this in a second, okay? But the reason that this became relevant is because everyone was memeing Mexicanized versions of the characters from K-pop Demon Hunters. So I just think this has been a very full circle World Cup, if you will. I personally don't think I can do this explanation justice, so I'm going to give y'all a little excerpt from All Things Considered that explains the Mexico-South Korea relationship. So here is that.
You don't often see supporters of opposing teams partying together before their World Cup matches, but the fans of Mexico and South Korea have been calling each other brother, and some are even hoping for a draw. NPR's Juliana Kim unpacks the camaraderie ahead of tonight's showdown.
Over the past week, you may have heard this chant on social media. That's Spanish for Korean brother, you are Mexican now. It's a callback to 2018, the last time that Mexico and South Korea faced off at the World Cup. Ray-On, who's Korean American, recorded himself singing with Mexican fans in Russia where the games were held. What was behind the chant? Well, in the final matches of the group stage, Mexico suffered a shocking loss to Sweden. That meant Mexico could only advance if South Korea beat Germany, who had won the last World Cup. Against all odds, the Asian squad pulled off the upset, stunning the crowd and announcers.
2-0 to South Korea. Incredible.
The win wasn't enough for South Korea to move forward, but the team was hailed as champions by grateful Mexican fans.
All of a sudden, we're surrounded by the Mexican fans. They're hugging us. They're singing the chant to us.
On was disappointed by his home country's early exit, but those celebrations gave him a new perspective.
This is what it's really about, right? Creating core memories with strangers in a foreign land.
He says he still bonds over the 2018 World Cup whenever he meets someone from Mexico.
It continued on, and now we're still facing and experiencing that at 2026, and it's only going to get bigger because Korea, us, we are actually going to play Mexico again in their land.
And that's exactly what's been unfolding so far this World Cup. On social media, videos show South Korean tourists partying with locals in Mexico. Earlier this month, when South Korea's squad arrived in Guadalajara, they were greeted by fans and a mariachi band. In the U.S., fans told NPR they're hoping both teams go far, calling the opposing squad their second favorite in the tournament. Some are even hoping for a diplomatic result. Fernando Delgado is a devout soccer fan from Los Angeles.
Like a draw would be like the ideal case. And
he's Mexican American, but many of his friends are of Korean descent.
Because I think other than that, it's going to be like, oh man.
Fans say they're rooting for both teams because of their shared underdog status. Neither have made it to the quarterfinals in over 20 years. Others say the two have more heated rivals to focus on, like Japan for South Korea or the U.S. for Mexico. Some say the good rapport is a reflection of something deeper. Here's Emmanuel Han, a Korean-American soccer fan.
If we drew with Mexico, I think it would be the ultimate sort of handshake moment. And it's crazy because I don't know if I would say that about any other country.
He says in Los Angeles and other cities, the two communities often live and work side by side. That's also true in Mexico, which saw a wave of Korean migration in the 20th century.
I think Koreans, the Korean diaspora specifically, and the Mexican diaspora, they do see a lot of commonalities in each other's experiences.
Delgado agrees. That's what he remembers when he watched the Mexico versus South Korea World Cup match in 2018.
It wasn't like we were putting one down over the other. It was more fun. It was more connection.
Delgado says making good memories would be a win, regardless of the score tonight. Juliana Kim, NPR News.
So that's the actual, status of things, like the reason, the relationship, etc. And it's been really fun to follow. This, I think, is it's not the first World Cup where we've had social media. It's definitely the first World Cup that I think has been as present in social media, right? I feel like even, as it is, a lot of specifically World Cup content doesn't necessarily trend a lot in the US. And the US is not a very soccer-focused country, right? There are a lot of sports like hockey, like basketball, like football, like baseball that get all of the attention, to the point where I think the only time I personally ever see anything that's soccer related in the news is about the US women's team. And of course, that's its own full conversation that we won't get into today because I don't think we have the time. But that is definitely something that is interesting to see how it's kind of changing. A lot of the internet is very much so led by the US, despite, of course, the US being one country against the rest of the world. But the fact of the matter is a lot of trends originate here. And that's just kind of how it is. Not that they originate here, like as in the trend happens here first and then it takes off. A lot of the things that trend, they start trending here before it becomes popular worldwide. TikTok, I will say, has been pivotal in kind of changing that, right? There have been a lot of stories in general about how there's different subsets of Twitter, for example, right? And of course, being said, it includes different, I guess, corners of Twitter where most people navigate via hashtags, right? But you still kind of see a curated feed if you want to partake in a different quote unquote community or social biome. You can. It's easy to find. With the kind of crazy surge that TikTok has become and the way that other social media platforms have mirrored it, it's, I think, impossible at this point to not see World Cup content, right? I feel like I've heard a lot more people talk about it that usually wouldn't, that don't care. And it's not even usually about the game. It's about the relationship between the countries. Of course, like I said, Mexico and South Korea has been a massive one, and one that I'm very excited about because it's given us things like this remix, which I'll play for you here. Which is like Mexican country music version of one of the songs from K-pop Demon Hunters. And that's just one country's duality. There's been so much more than that, and it's been really, really fun to see. There's no end of it. The content is endless. There's been clips from the actual players themselves going viral and showing up in feeds of people who don't necessarily care. For example, in Argentina's team, there was a last-minute injury which left open a spot on the roster, and I believe his name is pronounced Marcos Senesi, was brought in last minute. And that was, I think, one of the first things I saw go viral. Like I said, there's been crossover with other sports. For example, with the Knicks going as crazy as they did with two insane comebacks game after game. The U.S. men's team themselves posted that someone should go check on one of their players who is a Knicks fan, Tyler Adams. As we have here in the chat, Messiah said everyone and their mother was at the North Carolina Hurricanes parade, which of course included soccer fans that just so happened to be around, just getting kind of swept up in like the chaos of it all. I want to say there was a number that I saw that was insane for the parade after the Carolina Hurricanes won. I don't know where I saw it, and I don't know how accurate it is, but the city of Raleigh estimated about 180,000 people to be in attendance, and that is not an exaggeration. There was an insane amount of people coming through North Carolina specifically for that. Not only, of course, being people that live here, people who follow sports here in the U.S. We have, I think, an additional... let me find that number out for you, actually. I don't even want to lie to you. But again, there's a lot of visitors from all over the world here in North America and the U.S. as well. that have been staying here and participating in, everything that we do. I think the estimate is about to be 10 million different tourists and visitors because of these games. And it's been really cool to see the crossover between the sports. And like I said, bringing people like myself in who only care specifically about, the big games, but also people who've just been kind of hopping on the bandwagon, not even for any specific team, but for the sports in general. The players themselves have been participating in other sports. For example, there was a video I saw that went viral of, I think, the Algerian team captain kicking a field goal, which, it makes sense if it had to be anything for a soccer player to hit something like that. And then I think also trying his hand at basketball. And there's also a really cool thing happening across the countries and across the nations, because a lot of the teams are setting up home-based camps in different cities so that they can keep practicing and so that they can stay somewhere that's not necessarily where the games are taking place, especially because they have to go here and there and everywhere. So here in the U.S., I think since we're talking about Algeria, I think they're staying in Kansas. Here in North Carolina, I know the Norway team is staying in Greensboro. I think the Scottish are staying in Boston, and I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that the city ran out of beer because of how much extra tourism there is. And it's, again, been really, really, really fun to see how all of this has gone down. I have no words other than how amazing it is. And I've seen a tweet that said it's kind of like when all of the cousins hang out and get along, despite the fact that their parents hate each other, of course, referencing to the fact that the people from the actual countries themselves, everyone's getting along, and politics doesn't necessarily have a place in sports just because the governments don't get along. And that, I think, is something that I truly, truly emphasize, just because I am a big proponent of separating the artist from the art. We all know this. We all, I think, have sat at some point in a conversation with me where I'm talking about this. And I think that this is definitely one of those cases. The argument, of course, being the money that is being spent in every country and the money that is spent because of tourism, whatever. And recently I've gotten into a lot of conversations about, I don't like my taxpayer dollars, as if we had control over that. But I digress. I think it's definitely one of those things where it really does come down to the people that make up the countries, right? Everyone's there to be a fan of one thing and be there about one thing, and that's it. And I think that's definitely, like I said, how I, in general, view everything. I know it's sometimes controversial whenever it is an individual, such as one musician, one artist, one author, one actor, versus whenever it's, a huge amount of people, 10 million people, all representing their country's flag, but the connection is to their athletic representatives and not necessarily their own version of their federal representatives, right? And I was thinking about this the other day, specifically, again, in the context of Mexico being mine. There's a duck that's gone viral because it's been wearing a Mexico jersey, and the kid is like a huge soccer fan, etc., etc., etc. And I saw in the comment section of something that, people have their stereotypes of Mexico, and it's like, you really think Merlin the duck is the one bringing crime? And then it was like a quote of things that the American president has said about Mexico, and it had a mugshot of the duck. And it just kind of put into perspective how ridiculous those sorts of conversations really are in a world where everyone's just trying to be excited and have fun and get to know about other people and learn about each other's cultures. I was watching a Twitch stream of someone who usually plays video games, and there was a day where instead of playing video games for the whole time, there was about an hour or two dedicated to just watching clips of the World Cup. And I just thought, if sports can break into the gaming world, where typically there's kind of this attitude about what's sports ball, I am happy for it. I hate whenever people try to act like they're too cool for something, like they're too unique to participate in pop culture. So seeing this kind of become a part of everyone's day has been very, very, very fun. And it's also just been kind of cool to see what people are doing in like the cities that they're quote unquote taking over. For example, I saw pictures of the Rocky statue in Philly wearing an Ecuadorian jersey, and there being just like a massive amount of people at the Philly Museum of Art just for the sake of having the Rocky statue wearing that jersey. And as you know from a previous episode of the podcast, I recently went to that museum. And let me tell you, there usually is a crowd. There is a line to take pictures with the Rocky statue. So the fact that the Ecuadorian fans were able to take over that statue and convert Rocky into being Ecuadorian, my full level of impressiveness and just sheer awe and admiration for that, for the sake that they were able to cut through the Philly fans. And there's just been so much of that. In Boston, there was also a parade of Haitian fans, and I think it was a fan parade. I don't know if it was like an official parade or not, but they took over the city, and there was a video of the Scottish fans at Fenway Park. They're calling themselves the Tartan Army. I think I also saw that they didn't really want to have to drive, for hours to get to the games because of the traffic, because of the new country. They also obviously didn't want to walk because most of the US is not necessarily walkable. So I saw that there was a huge effort to rent out all of the yellow school buses. They all thought it was a joke, right? They all thought it was funny. They've seen it on The Simpsons. There was a news story about this. I'm paraphrasing what I saw. And they thought it was the coolest thing ever, and so they just like rented out all of the yellow school buses that they could find. They, you pay for like your quote unquote pass that gets you drinks and water and, extra game day necessities and a ride back and forth because they're using the buses as shuttles. So everyone was like, oh man, I wonder how, the foreigners are going to deal with being in America specifically. And they are getting along just fine. They are making do just fine. I think the rest of the world is beautifully creative and so equipped at being adaptable, which I love. It's been, like I said, so fun to see just how cool. It's so cool to see how everyone's proving that, the relationships between countries and the stereotypes about foreigners, like it's just a very loud minority that has a lot to say. Everyone else is just trying to have fun. Like I said, Norway specifically is interesting to me because they're based here in North Carolina. I think North Carolina has 3 teams staying here, but Norway I think is the closest to me specifically. And they also have gone crazy viral because they have a chant where they all act like they're rowing a giant Viking ship, and they have like a chant that they do. I'm not gonna try to butcher it, but it's just so cool. I think I have a video here that I can show you if it is indeed of said chant. Yes. So now everyone that's around them, Norwegian or not, are also participating. It's genuinely, like I said, I have never been so impressed at how well the world gets along with each other. That being said, I think a moment has to be taken out to appreciate how beautiful the opening ceremonies were for Canada and for Mexico specifically. All 3 host countries had like their opening ceremony where like a singer sang a song and then they did the parade of flags. For some reason, the full, like, I guess, I don't even know why the differentiation. There's that part of the opening ceremony, but there was also like a proper like introduction that the countries did. You can find the full, I guess, ceremony for the U.S. The U.S., I believe the English broadcast is being done by Fox. You can find that on YouTube. Telemundo uploaded the one for Mexico. I dug and dug to try to find the Canadian one, and I can't find the full thing. It's like chopped up in bits and pieces. Telemundo has a summary of it. Fox only has the part where Michael Bublé sings and then they bring out the flags. I, however, did manage to find the opening part, which is the part that I thought that was the most interesting, on a Facebook page called World Indigenous News. Because the Mexican opening ceremony and the Canadian opening ceremony both began with their indigenous peoples. And I'm glad I found the clip. The Mexican one, of course, has the audio quality of something being broadcast on television. The Canadian one, I could only find a video of someone recording their TV. That's what was, I guess, submitted to World Indigenous News, unless I'm wrong, and this is what the person that works or that hosts the World Indigenous News page themselves recorded. Either way, I want y'all to hear those two things because I think that's important to highlight. And we're a little short for time, so I don't know if I'll play the whole thing. I'll play the Canadian ceremony and the Canadian ceremony summary. I rather, and I will skip through the American one, specifically because I'll explain after we hear this. Let me not tarnish your impression. I'm gonna let you listen, and then we'll talk about it. All right. So, this is the Canadian opening. We'll work our way backwards. We're gonna end with my beautiful, beloved Mexico, best for last. All right, here's Canada.
Meets the mountains, where voices have gathered for generations. We are still here. We carry the songs. We carry the stories. We carry the heartbeat. Today, in Takaranto, on the land of the Mississaugas of the Credit, we gather once more. From coast to coast to coast, from the first peoples of this land, to those who came from every part of the world, generation after generation. This is more than a moment. This is true connection.
C'est un lien véritable. Cette diversité de parcours, de voix et de rêves.
That today come together.
Aujourd'hui, unissons-nous.
Welcome all to Canada.
Bienvenue à tous au Canada.
Welcome to the FIFA World Cup 2026.
Bienvenue à la Coupe du Monde de la FIFA 2026.
So that was William Prince of the Peguis First Nation, and the inclusion of it was so interesting because I feel like a lot of people who aren't, I guess, of certain origin, I feel like a lot of people don't realize that Native Americans, Indigenous people, however you would like to refer to them and however they would like to be referred to as First Nations, I feel like a lot of people don't realize that these groups of people who are native to the Americas exist across all of the Americas, not just the U.S. And every country, of course, has their own personal relationship. And I've been having a lot of conversations about this recently because June is Immigrant Heritage Month. And me, as someone who is Mexican, who grew up with an American lifestyle, but with parents who emphasize, here's what you need to know about the world through the general perspective and through the Mexican perspective, I recognize that I have a lot of really great privilege in the form of knowledge, because my parents, of course, they both went to school, they both are well-traveled, they're both well-rounded, seasoned individuals, and I grew up with a lot of information that I think a lot of people don't get. And me growing up with that sort of background, and also in a diverse area, and also knowing people from all walks of life, I didn't realize what the world was like. And I've talked about a little bit about that here and there, of course. But I thought that this was an amazing thing for the Canadian group that planned this to do, and for the Mexican group that planned this to do. And I will now let y'all listen to the summary of the full opening ceremony, so you can get the kind of feel that there was with the Canadian opening celebration, for lack of better phrasing. Like I said, they were split into two parts, like the performance and then the quote unquote ceremony, but I digress. Here's that. So this was followed by Alessia Cara. And in the background, you had these beautiful, like, I don't know what to call them. You had these beautiful, like, articulated things that were, you know how dragon dancers, for example, at Chinese New Year's. I'm trying to describe this auditorily if you've never seen this. It's like a lot of people holding up on the sticks the figure, right? That's what they had. They had a whale, a moose, and a polar bear. So like a tribute, of course, to their natural animals and the cold nature, I guess, of what they have. They also had a performance by Nora Fatehi and Vegedream Isanjoy, which is this here. The ball in the center was supposed to come up like a full proper trophy, by the way. That was a technical difficulty that they all overcame in the spot. Super professional. No one even knew it was an issue until the announcers said so. But anyway, super cool how they did the Canadian flag logo on the ground with like mosaic tiles. I don't know. Jessie Reyes, Eliana. Now they're surrounded by dancers that are waving flags, and I need you to understand how much I don't know about Canada and how much I wish I knew more about Canada, because I have such FOMO just from not understanding what's being referenced here. Okay. So that was the Canadian opening ceremony. A mixture of Spanish, English, French. They had, like I said, the First Nations performance with William Prince, who is of I think it was Peguis origin, descent. I don't know what the proper words are to use a lot of the times. But that was Canada's, right? Really cool, well-rounded. I did see that some people wish they had actually someone from like Quebec, someone who was of French Canadian roots themselves. But I here have to declare myself unknowledgeable of what the Canadian conversation is, as someone who does not live in Canada. I've spent some time in Canada, but that's kind of the extent of it, right? So that was that. The thing is, with that being what it is, and you'll see how Mexico's was. Like I said, I'm saving best for last year. The U.S. has felt interesting. It began with kind of an aerial shot of the Hollywood sign, and then you'll hear.
Welcome to the U.S.A. We are 50 states and over 340 million fans. We are 430 languages.
we are soccer and football and football. From the Black Hills to the Hollywood Hills. From the Golden Gate Bridge to the Brooklyn Bridge. From Puget Sound to the Florida Panhandle.
Which, don't even get me started on the U.S.A.'s chant for their team, okay? Don't even get me started. We like it. We love it.
Because we support the U.S., U.S., U.S. And that's the way we like it. We like it. We love it.
So that was the introduction. Then you have someone that runs in, kicking a golden ball. And then pyrotechnics. And then Future. Future and Tyler are on this song together. And then you had a song that's Lisa, Anita, and Rima. Anita sang in Spanish. And then you have Rima coming in. And then you had the these banners rolled out that said LA. This was happening in LA, granted. Okay? My take on the U.S.'s ceremony. My take on the U.S.'s ceremony was that it was very... You heard the lyrics, right? Very... Your problems are not mine. It's game time. I'm a pop star. I'm goals. Whatever. And I thought it was interesting as well because it kind of gave me a feeling of like... It felt like a Super Bowl halftime show, right? Not necessarily a World Cup opening ceremony. There was later, of course, Katy Perry singing Wonder with a Kid, which I thought fit more the mood of the day. But compared to Canada's, they feel different, right? We did have the multilingual aspect of soccer, football, and then Anita singing bilingually. But I don't know. I expected all the countries to do something patriotic, right? And I remember I had read an article that said something along the lines of Canada will highlight its First Nations and its natural biodiversity and wildlife. Mexico will feature as their motif the papel picado, which is our ornamental like tissue paper that you see in like the background of Coco and everything else that we do, I guess, with all of the shapes cut out for whatever event in different colors. And the US will feature a shiny gold ball. And I read that article and I'm like, this article has to have been written outside of the US. They're just like, you know, they're probably being some sort of petty against the US. Worldwide, it makes sense given the political state of things. And then I watched the opening ceremonies and I was like, oh, that is kind of all it was. The beginning, of course, was interesting. Like the speech is like, we're a nation built on freedom. And it kind of gives patriotic in a way. It's a guy dressed in a colonial outfit, you know, like marching, like a soldier's outfit. I don't know what that's called. But that was kind of where it ended, right? And then the performances hit, and they're not all like necessarily like fixtures, I guess, of the American landscape. Granted, I will say, watching the Canadian opening ceremony, I think their headliner, the one that sang Before the Flags, was Michael Bublé. And other than that, like so William Prince is, like I said, famous, and especially so for being of the Peguis First Nations. I didn't know Alessia Cara was Canadian. I learned something that day. And then you had, like I said, you had them singing in French and in Spanish. So it kind of made sense, right? It did feel, I guess, inclusive of everything and of everyone. As far as like from an outsider's perspective, I felt like, yeah, that's Canada. You had everything they said. They told us we would get performances from people we knew. They told us we would have the nature. They told us we would have the First Nations. The Mexican ceremony, the news actually chose like not to spoil like almost anything. They just knew that the motif would be the papel picado. Each country had like a trophy as the center point of their set design. The U.S.'s sure was shiny. Canada's Alessia Carr actually came out of the ball. It was really cool. They like peeled off the outer shell, and then it was like a really cool like structural situation. And then Mexico's was made out of papel picado, and I'm gonna let y'all listen to that ceremony as well. But I want y'all to hear just the difference, I guess, in the crowds. Visually, it was interesting. Not a single empty space for Mexico's. A lot of empty seats for the US. Empty seats less so in Canada. Let me show y'all auditorily Mexico's, because I thought that this was interesting. Like I said, the difference between the three. That's in Otomí. That's in Spanish. Welcome to Mexico. This is in Mixe from Oaxaca. I didn't see where the other guy was speaking from. That's in Zapoteco. That's in Raramuri. Spanish again. That's in Cora. And then they all start to overlap. So the countdown was in a number of indigenous languages and in Spanish. And then this is the opening.
She's saying you see so many colors and so many cultures from a nation that hasn't stopped believing.
With scars and colors, we enter the stadium in Mexico City. On the stage, there were Aztec dancers in their full feathered outfits, holding their drums in the air, and they're all wearing their Aztec headdresses, full getup.
And what you're hearing now is some form of Aztec drumming and chanting, while Aztec dancers, some in the full, of course, Aztec headdress, getup, etc., and some in full gold soccer uniforms are performing a dance. That's Leela Downs interpreting a message of welcome to the world, celebrating diversity, national pride, and the unifying power of soccer.
That was in English.
En inglés, en español, con estos danzantes aztecas y estos futbolistas dorados. The FIFA World Cup is a beacon of shared passion that connects nations across continents. The trophy is not defined by one player, not by one nation, but by all. La pelota dorada se ha convertido en el trofeo de esta Copa Mundial de la FIFA.
The gold ball in the center of the stage turns into the World Cup trophy, and it's very cool. It's made out of papel picado. More on that later, though.
So this was focused on the ancestry, on the music, on the dance, the art, and the symbolism that is traditional Mexico, with a contemporary interpretation. The floor was also turquoise, which turquoise is used a lot by indigenous people. And the Gold Cup trophy is made of papel picado. Pyrotechnics. And then Maná, which is Mexico's biggest rock band. And I want you to hear the stadium sing along.
Do you hear that?
Okay, so then they cut like to the normal mics. And the crowd still bleeds through into their mics.
And it sounds like this is just their mics, like no more stadium mics, and it's just creating like a... it's making it sound out of sync. They're so loud.
To the point where you're hearing feedback from his mic from the crowd. Loop, loop, loop.
And you see him at some point take out his in-ear, which is so funny, but also like, what a champ!
And it was one of the coolest things to see the Aztec dancers going crazy. I mean, giving it their all
in the dancing
along to one of Mexico's biggest rock bands, if not Mexico's biggest rock band.
Cannot stress enough how beautiful this was. There is no better word. Simply for how timeless and current this all was. Because
if you've ever seen people headbang at a rock concert, that is what the Aztec dancers are doing with their headdresses. And so what you just heard the reporter say is one of the band's catchphrases from one song specifically, Is It Biggin', where the lead singer calls to the drummer to, go crazy. And so that was just the beginning. They then also featured, I believe, Danny Ocean,
who was surrounded by a bunch of dancers from the Mexican folkloric ballet. So you see them in their big, the colorful ribbon braids and the twirly dresses, etc., which has been established since 1952.
Los Ángeles Azules. And the phrase you just heard is their catchphrase, where they say, de Iztapalapa para el mundo, so from Iztapalapa to the world. And this time they said, from Mexico to the world.
Como voluntarios en este mundial, ¿no? Traen las casacas. Y ahora sí, de Medellín para el mundo.
And then for whatever reason, La Boo Boos, followed by J Balvin, while people scream, Viva Mexico! But it's very, very cool to see that they, opened it up to the rest of Latin America. That's so sick.
And of course, no World Cup could be complete without Shakira, who is unofficially, I think, their headliner.
Which, if you think about it, she's done 4. That means that she's been doing World Cups for 16 years.
And so, the contrast between the opening ceremonies, as Shogun said in the chat, not to be biased, Mexico's ceremony, I think, was the best. The combination of the Aztec dancers staying on stage with Mexico's biggest rock band and transitioning that into the rest of the set. The gold cup in the center being made of papel picado. The motifs, the symbolism, like they said at the beginning, was clean and clear through and through, and it preached unity. And I think that's what was missing from the U.S.'s. Like I said, Canada had it too. Canada had the combination, of course, first of William Prince being someone who's a big singer, a big name, with the inclusion, of course, of the performance that you heard from the First Nations individuals. And then Alessia Cara singing while the people were walking around with the giant articulated versions of 3 of their, I guess, most prominent animals to symbolize, of course, the importance of their wildlife and their nature, and then transitioning into the trilingual performance, right? That, to me, says unity, right? Same thing with the Mexican performance. Like I said, the symbolism being clean and clear the whole way through, plus the performers themselves, and then representing singers across all of Latin America, I thought was amazing. The U.S. gave me nothing that I was expecting. They sang songs from the official list of World Cup official songs, but it wasn't there. And I realized something. Like I said, with June being Immigrant Heritage Month, I've been having a lot of conversations about identity. I was on a private panel about this, and it's interesting to see, I guess, how every country treats their concept of patriotism, of nationalism, plus their perception of foreigners, plus their perception of their indigenous people. And I feel like something the U.S. does is treat its indigenous ancestry like it's a thing of the past, and like these are not people that still walk beside us today, people who are not even, and even people who are not actively us in the modern day, right? I won't speak for Canada. I don't know anything about Canada as far as politics and history goes, outside of, very, very broad strokes. But as far as Mexico goes, I can tell you for a fact, like it's a much more integrated culture. Like you saw, or like you heard rather, all of our entire attitude and our culture and our perception of the world is a little bit different, because I think it's a lot more integrated. And that's not to say that there's not the same social issues that befall every country, whether it's classism or colorism or any other ism you want to throw in there. As it is taught and as it is seen, it's just given what we saw, I guess, in the opening ceremonies, Canada and Mexico lead with unity, right? They lead with awareness, whereas the U.S. seems to focus more on freedom and flash. And that, given like I said, given the state of the world right now and the perception of things, from the performances alone, it definitely kind of emphasizes that is what the U.S. is about. So me, being who I am, I'd like to think of myself as, being open-minded and open-hearted. Me having lived in one country while being from another country, while trying to keep up with the other country of the three countries that are involved here, the opening ceremonies kind of confirmed my suspicions and surprised me in different ways. Mexico, of course, was everything that I hoped and dreamed it would be, and even more. The hidden symbolism. Like I said, I learned something with everything that I ever see about my home country, because I didn't grow up there. The U.S. surprised me in that they went more for a Super Bowl halftime feel, and it seems like their budget was more so in getting big names rather than names that are representative, I guess, of the American identity. And Canada surprised me because I didn't realize how, I guess, integrated their culture is as well. And like I said, I've been learning a lot, but that being said, just from their performances, compared to how we started the show talking about how people from the different countries are all getting along, I think is why I'm so impressed and why I'm so obsessed with seeing all of the clips and all of the things that the internet has to offer of people from different countries, being cohesive. That has made my heart very happy. But I digress, and I think that wraps up our special edition World Cup episode of Podcast with a K, nice and tight. So, for Podcast with a K, I'm Carla with a K, signing off. I'm going to leave you with Mi Mexico Lindo by Alejandro Fernandez. You're listening to WECS 90.1 FM, or wherever it is that you get your podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes. We'll be back with new nonsense, new guests. I've got some great stuff coming up, but I will see you in the next one, and have a fantastic rest of your week.